If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode.
Welcome into the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me once again, I have Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
I am splendiferous. A veritable wash of emotions and thoughts dribbling through my brain as I have seen and experienced true wonder of media. My eyes sparkle with the effervescent thoughts that dance through my head. How about you?
I'm doing good. That was quite the detailed exposition right there.
All right, that was a little much. Maybe too much, in fact. You think it was too much?
I mean, I think, and as you always set me up so well, like the point guard of the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, always passing dimes here. You are setting us up for our topic, which is using excessive detail to improve your immersion. And I feel like I feel so much more connected to this episode now that you started by describing your day and your existence that way.
My current mood. Yeah, I'm sorry. I actually do. I saw this on a list of topics, and as I was telling you before we started recording, just finished season 2 of Andor. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about it, and one of the things that brought me to this topic, was there was so many little details in dialogue, in scenes, in the way that people moved and talked. There were scenes with no talking at all. It's just shots of people reacting or existing in places that told volumes of story. And I was sitting there thinking about it, and like you had written down, using excessive detail to improve your immersion. And that show has a lot of that really going for it. So, you know, it's in my mind. And like I said, I just finished it. So it's like it's right there, man. It's there in my head. It's spilling from my eyes.
No, I had thought of this topic in relation to the game that we're currently running, where the Jared's telling us, and he put together these very detailed documents, and obviously you told me, well, you could just have AI generate all this stuff for you, but they were like mission briefs. So we had like multi-page documents, we had like legal documents, we had all these things. So it's just very like highly produced documents that, you know, that help set the mood for what you're doing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so it's like when, you know, if you're at a table, like these would be the types of things that you would pass around as like the handouts. Okay. Yeah. And this would be the thing where you'd hand them to people and they'd go, wow, you did something really, really special here. Like this is a lot of interesting stuff. And there's a lot of like story hidden in the documents there as well. Like he's purposely built it in such a way that everything kind of speaks to something else that's going to end up happening there. I guess there was something we completely missed. He was offering up extra experience if somebody had found it, but no, he did. So, but that was basically the first session, was oohing and eyeing over the document. But the document told the briefing that he had, so it was a Q&A with the document. So, you know, we would read parts of the document, we'd ask him questions. So, you know, whether or not you find that part of gaming compelling or not, it's an interesting thing, though, because you are giving somebody something so detailed in general. And a lot of times, if you were to do that in person, you hand somebody a document like that, they would probably read it very in depth at your table, and you'd probably spend, you know, an hour or two just sitting there, you know, trying to filter through it and see what's what.
Yeah. That reminds me quite a bit of the Hunt a Killer games. I know we've played them.
Yep.
I've got a couple of them, or I think I have donated them to my local library after I'm done. Because really you can't play them a second time. But in those games, dear listener, if you do not know, you are given a pile of evidence and a murder. And the evidence leads to certain clues and information, and there's usually a lockbox and clues on how to open the lockbox. And inside the lockbox, there is additional evidence that finalizes your solution to who done did the murder. But the important thing is not the evidence, because the documentation, the little bits and clues and stuff like that, they're excessively detailed. They are just like a cornucopia of information relating not just to the murder, but the scene, the environment, the feel. You go to there's a vineyard murder, a murder at a vineyard, and you get wine listings, and you get like the history of the vineyard, and you get a map of the vineyard, and you get like information about the grapes. There's a cork, there are like little wine trinkets, all sorts of stuff. There's a wine stain on the map. There's all sorts of things that they are additional details that are added to the information that sort of sets the scene, that gets you into the spirit of the thing. It's not just like, here's the puzzle, solve the puzzle. It is, look at all this stuff that reasonably could be part of this scene, and builds from there. And that takes it from here's a 5-minute puzzle or like a 30-minute puzzle or whatnot, and turns it into a real experience. And you can use that same sort of thing in your tabletop games to really sell the story that you're telling.
Yeah, I think you can just add a super intense detail like level of immersion of the game. And again, what I would always recommend is, you don't have much of a game if you don't have, like in the Hunter Killer thing, if you don't have the mystery, it's not going to work at all. So you have to have the pieces worked out as to how you're going to get there. But then the immersion is all the things that go around, all the other window dressing that goes with it. And so, yes, once you build, the base foundation of the game, it works. It's you can get to the end of it. You've got all your story beats put together. That's when you can really spend your time adding this extra bit of detail to add to the immersion of the game. And then you could take your game from, this is typically what separates your like a game where people go like, I really enjoyed that game. That was a good game. That was a lot of fun, to, wow, that was a super memorable game. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is typically what people are trying to achieve when they do gaming, is they're trying to get to this like, pinnacle style game that's super memorable, and it's super like engaging, and there's so much about it that they remember. It's got fun NPCs. There were all these places that you went to, all this other stuff. Like, this is what you're trying to strive towards. And I think that adding all these extra details helps build that game. But again, as you've listened to the podcast, start with the basics, get the basics out of the way, then do this. This is the next piece of it.
Don't go into this first. What you're saying, make a good game.
Yes.
And then level it up.
Level it up.
Level it up.
Maybe 3 or 4 levels. I don't know.
Power level it up. I have been of the opinion, and I want to, run this past you. I don't think you need to do printouts. I don't think you need to physically create these objects and hand them out at the table. I think that you can do a lot of the same stuff with descriptive storytelling and provide your players with theater of the mind descriptive details if you go really in depth with your descriptions.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree with that. You don't need any You don't need maps. You don't need any of that stuff. Like all that stuff is nice to haves. Okay. They are useful tools in your toolbox, but you can add all the description through just good descriptors. You can have lively NPCs. You can have them have unique personalities and, unique traits about them and details about them, or you can describe these documents that you get and you can give them to the players and you can highlight things within the documents themselves or describe the documents and have the players sort of play the digging into it sort of game by asking leading questions about the documents that you can then help navigate them deeper and deeper into the documents.
And honestly, if you're going to go with excessive details, it doesn't have to be leveled just at the clues or the mystery part of the game. Use your ability to do excessive detail, that really descriptive, that really involved. Even if you want to do handouts and stuff like that, or like if you're doing an in-person game, you can use that also for the characters, your NPCs, the scenes that you're in. This is the whole point behind like having background music. If you're in a place, you can set a mood with background music. You can do the same thing with the way that you describe things, the way that you lay out a scene. And if you've got specific characters and you're doing like an in-person game, maybe you'd have like a trinket or something like that you can put out on the table, or hand out to your players to get them a little bit more of that understanding of where they're at. They're at a market. They're handing out. Somebody's handing out flyers or whatnot for a new stall, and you can like throw the flyer out for them. These things can be red herrings. They don't have to be part of red herring is the right word. It's just like, it is window dressing. It is not necessarily part of a mystery or part of the story. It can just be part of the description of the environment to really get your players involved in that environment. And the same thing, environments you can also do for NPCs, for your characters. Like, we talk about understanding, and I know we've talked about this before, the motivations or the history, or like why a character does a thing really makes them more of a character, makes them more interesting, allows you to tell a better story about them. But knowing those same things can also give you a good description of how do they look? How do they dress? What environment are they going to be in? How are they going to present themselves? If they've got a certain motivation, if they've got a certain history, if they have a certain attitude about things, they're going to act and react and dress and present themselves in a specific way. And you should have, if you've built a thorough character, you should have that information.
Yeah, I think, what you said about this not needing to be something that is directly like connected to your story is correct. Because obviously when you create your story, you're going to put the right amount of details in it to make those points immersive and engaging in general. This is more about like anything else that you encounter along the way. So like making your environments, like you said, useful and interesting. Okay, which is something that you can do, and we encourage doing that, but you don't always do it. You don't always think about all like the different things that go into an environment or the dungeon you're in or wherever you are. Okay, but those are things that help bring you into the scene better, and even if they're not pertinent to like the clues or the mystery or forwarding the story, you've already done all that hard work. This is the time for you to add excess in areas that are just around the players, to just make things, because this is where the intersection between player driven and like in story driven kind of come together, because the more details that you add to random things that are around the story, the more interesting players find interest in the detail. Okay, or they will likely find interest in your details, whether it's the interesting NPC or blah blah blah. And those are the things that will make side stories or the memorable moments that are part of a game, because your players will engage with stuff that they would not typically engage with, because you might just be like, well, this is Barry the blacksmith, and Barry the blacksmith is good for smithing weapons. Okay, but maybe you tell this story about who he is, and you give him a very boisterous personality, or a very grizzled personality, or you give him a very silly and you've highlighted that in his shop there's always this this one broken sword that remains on the table, and these are things about the NPC that have nothing to do with your story. Your players came here to smith weapons, but it's a thing that the players can now dig into and find out more about. Okay, there are details about the shop, and in the broken armors and all these things that he doesn't take care of, and well, why is that? And then you can dive into Barry the blacksmith's tragic backstory, or was he is it a heroic backstory, and he vowed never to smith again, but he's doing it for you this one time. I don't know, but
well, and Barry, Barry's the blacksmith shop. You can go into more details than just what's on the walls. Don't stick with just what you can see. And I think that really opens up the possibilities for how you describe things. If you've got a handout, like a physical handout, either something you put on the table in front of your players, or hand them so they can pass around or hold, it's physically in their hands. But if you're doing a descriptive scene, you want to really get into that. You've got this very cool blacksmith with a big tragic backstory, and you want the players to be interested. You can give a little bit more to it. Yeah, you can see the broken armor and the sword on the wall. You can see how everything is really well put together, and everything is in its own space. He keeps the whole place clean despite there being an open hearth in the back, billowing out soot and ashes. But that one spot where his broken armor is it's left to dust and to molder. But you can go into your other senses too. You can hear the crackling of the fire. You can hear, that slow hum of the billows pushing the air through. You can taste the soot in the air, but maybe just a little bit of cinnamon in your smell, because Barry throws a couple of sticks of cinnamon into the fire to sort of mask all of the ash and smoke that comes out of it. That every surface in there has been wiped down and is waxy, because he tries to keep it as clean as he can, because there is so much dirt that comes out. And you can really get your senses moving for this, and describe scenes in ways that you wouldn't normally, by thinking about all of your senses. You can write them down and just write little blurbs, like, what does this room smell like? What does the room sound like? There's always background noise. There's always sound wherever you go. There's always a smell or a taste in the air that we generally don't think about, but it's always there. And everything has texture. Everything you touch has a feel to it. And even what does it sound like when the characters step into the room, their feet against the floor, right? That's a sound, that's a touch, that's a thing.
Yeah, again, what you're trying to drive home is that hopefully the level of excessive detail here, not just to bring in the immersion to the scene itself, because we've talked about using your senses to improve your scenes overall, but to call attention to different things within the room, to give contextual clues as to who he might be. And that's marrying the concept of just using the senses and then making something more out of it. And so that's where like your immersion, okay, I'm literally sensing everything here because that's how Josh is describing it as the, you know, as the DM. But not only that, now there's this whole extra added layer that the immersion and all these pieces that Josh talks about help me understand more about who this person is or what this place is as well. And those contextual clues there then like lead to like the next level in storytelling. You've now leveled up, okay?
Well, let's take that the step further. You've described the scene. You know, we said that it's a exceptionally clean for a blacksmith shop, except for the old armor, broken armor and sword in this corner that have been left to rot. That there's, you know, waxy surface from his excessive cleaning, that he's even throwing cinnamon into the fire to give it the smell to overcome it. But then you look at the man himself, and while his apron may be immaculate, you know, well put together, very worn, you can see where the leather has become shiny, that he's touching it. You can see the well-worn tools in his belt that have been repaired over and over and over. But his beard is just a mess. And his eyebrows are wild. His hair, you can see, has got little soot and embers all throughout it. That he nervously touches his hand to his other hand while he's talking. He can't keep his arms still. Right? And now you've got this sense of like who the character is. This is a man that's had a troubled past and is doing everything he can to keep it down. He tries to maintain his environment as much as possible. And you've thought about this. You've created this character. Yes. And you've given him an environment and you've given him a personality. And I haven't said one word that's come from his mouth, but the way that he speaks. You can describe the sound and tone of his voice. You don't actually have to do voices. It's much easier that way because, you know, Barry the Blacksmith could sound completely different if you're doing a voice this week and doing a voice 3 months from now when they come and visit him again. You forgot what that voice was.
Yeah, a lot of times in detail and description, if you've described what the voice should sound like, then letting the players imagine what that would look like is almost a little bit better. So like they'll fill in the other contextual clues. Like you've given them a lot of detail to help them fill in their piece of who this person is. I mean, if you're very consistent with like voices, then I would say definitely, you know, give it a go. But if you're not very consistent with voices, it's enough to give like these added details help shape the picture in somebody's mind eye in the theater of the mind as to what this looks like or who this person is. So, you know, definitely dig into that, lean into that because it's very helpful. And like you've added enough detail now where the players can form a good picture in their mind. They might all have different pictures. I don't know, but yeah, but you know, they would be able to, they have a good understanding of who the person is without you having to do very much else.
Yeah. So when we're talking about using all of your senses and we were describing scenes and characters and whatnot, we originally were talking about handouts, things that, you know, you actually give your players. And you don't have to worry about that if you're doing it in person, you know, what the touch and the smell of a piece of paper is. Except if it just came from your laser printer, it's going to look like it came from a laser printer. And if you're going to go through the effort of making fancy documents, like put some effort into it, right? If you are playing a modern game and these are files from, you know, a CIA or something like that, grab yourself a manila envelope, throw those files in there. Use a black Sharpie and cross out sections of it, right?
Redact a little bit.
Redact a little bit. Take some paper clips and like put an old photo that's way too grainy to see what's going on, clipped in the corner. You know, write in like a red pen or something like Don't let Johnson see this. Blah blah blah. Like give it some flavor. And so it's not just something you printed out and handed somebody. And just like I was saying with the Hunt to Killers, the documents themselves, if you're giving somebody a document, it doesn't have to be just the puzzle or just the clue. Have the clue in there and the main focus of the thing, but give it some life. Give it some flavor.
Yeah, this is to say don't also totally obfuscate your clue by giving too much detail.
Yes,
the Hunt to Killers are purposely designed to do that, so it's not a perfect one-to-one example. Like it's meant to be very, very challenging, depending on like the difficulty of the puzzle. But like, so you don't want all your details to totally obfuscate your clue. But
yeah, like if you're handing them the CIA document that's got all this, stuff's redacted and it's got notes in the margins and some weird photograph that's tacked on for no apparent reason, like you can highlight the part that's important. Be like, look at all this. By the way, just it's right there. The important thing is right there. You don't have to make it crazy. And if it's not, CIA, if you're talking about like a fantasy setting, you don't have to go and get vellum or sheepskin and scribe in your calligraphy pens. Seal it with wax.
If you do that, let us know. levelupgamingpodcast@gmail.com, because that's next level. Also, the level of practicing calligraphy to get a sheepskin.
I mean, I've got my calligraphy kit right here. Like right here, man. So, yes, it is absolutely a thing you can do, but you don't have to. You can give like a lot of those same details. Fold things up. There's a scene in Catch Me If You Can, where Leonardo DiCaprio plays a con man. Tom Hanks is trying to catch him. And early on in the movie, he's sitting in a principal's office and some girl is trying to hand in a note saying that her mom was letting her out a school note or something like that. And he says to her, "It's a fake. You need to fold it." Because the first thing you do with a note when somebody hands you is you fold it so you can stuff it in your pocket.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's details like that you can actually apply to your props. If you're going to be handing out props, like a CAA file is going to be in a manila envelope. It might have some staples. It might have a paper clip, whatnot. If you are looking at a scroll that has been handed over from hidden in some archives into some fantasy realm, it should be rolled up and maybe tied with some string. The way that you present these things to your characters, your players, is important. And that goes as much for physical objects as it does for the descriptions of non-physical ones. Embrace those senses. Embrace the way that those things are going to be presented and really describe them. Give them life.
Yeah. No, again, you want to. I keep coming back to it. I mean, like the excitement of being able to engage with a scene or a person or any of these things with all the additional senses. It just offers so many more reactive questions from your players, particularly for what they find interesting. Like, going back to Barry the Blacksmith, like you smelling the cinnamon in the air, like that's going to. I know my players that would they would ask a question. Why is there this smell of cinnamon in the air? They would look for the answer for that. Okay. Yeah. Now, whether it's something really simple and silly and throwaway, or whether you want to make it a deeper meaning to something like that. Again, because not everything has to have perfect meaning and like oh this is these details have to mean something important. They're there to raise levels of inquiry into your world and open the possibilities that anything in the world could be something exciting, basically.
Yeah. And it can be an important fact. Now, Barry the blacksmith throws the cinnamon in his fire because he doesn't want his customers to smell the soot and ash. He wants to make it a welcoming and inviting experience for his players and for his customers. And your players can just think, oh, that's really nice of him. He's a considerate individual. And maybe a player would think, yeah, but cinnamon is not native to this area, and he has to have that sort of shit imported. Where did it come from? And, the only people that supply things from the region, because it is under, some sort of scrutiny or in a foreign kingdom, would be these smugglers. Barry the blacksmith is supplying weapons to smugglers, and they're providing him with unique spices.
Yeah.
Hidden details.
Again, the inquiry into that helps you find these other little storylines. Now, is that something the players want to engage with? I don't know, but it gives them an opportunity. And had you never had the detail there in the first place, the players would never have had a reason to try to figure out that Barry the blacksmith is smuggling spices.
Now, that does bring me to another thing that I wanted to bring up was, so let's say we do have the cinnamon. Why would anybody notice that unless it would be a unique thing? And this is something that I've used in my games is when you are looking to describe a scene and you're trying to figure out like what's the important things, because I don't want to just like go on about, the entirety of the scene, describe it in massive detail and take forever. I want to give like a blurb. I want to have a descriptive blurb that gives those senses, that puts the players in the right frame of mind for what the scene is. And I want to make it quick so they can get on to doing the role playing. But I want to give them enough detail that they have stuff to work with, that it's descriptive, that it tells the story, that it moves like them into the right headspace, that it fills in some of the background gaps, but doesn't take forever for me to do it. So I think about it from the character's point of view.
Okay.
And that's two different things. First of all, that's the character themselves. If you've got a character, your player is playing a character who is a specific race and class, and has a specific history. The race and class means they physically sense things in the room a specific way. Like, maybe a lizard folk would feel the heat and be drawn to the warmth of it and the weird dryness of that furnace, that they're used to that moisture being in the air with the heat because of the jungle that they come from. Maybe a taller character could survey the scene better. A shorter character would be, looking at just how neat and tidy even the floor is, how the corners where this tall folk wouldn't be able to see are well taken care of. So you can give details that are specific to those characters so that your players are in the headspace of their characters. But the other half is the history. And I've done this a couple of times, and this is rather fun, is pointing out things that are new to the characters. Because if they're walking into the blacksmith and they've never smelled cinnamon before, you don't describe it as cinnamon. What does cinnamon smell like? Right? And
Smells like cinnamon.
It's exotic, it's spicy, but somehow sweet. It smells earthy and woodsy at the same time. It's got that sort of background smell. But you can even describe it just as cinnamon. The the point is that it's a unique smell because it's different from the normal experience, right? What, like if they're walking into a city and these people have only ever been out in the woods, the wilds, you might describe the cobblestone floor, the cobblestone streets, or the fact the houses are real close together. If they're, from the plains and they're up in the mountains, like the sheer size of the mountains and the coldness and the rocks and stuff like that, that's interesting to them. It may not be interesting to your players, but it is interesting to the characters and gives them a place where they can oh, this is how I'm going to role play it because this character has never seen these things before.
That's a good guideline for how to add. I didn't think about that in terms of finding your character's point of view and what they might find interesting or different in a situation.
Yeah. In my desert campaign, that was a big thing because at one point they left the desert city and crossed the wastelands to get to the port city that supplied them with resources. Being in the port, the smell of the sea, the cool air coming off the water, that taste of salt in the air, the ribbons from the city that they have because they have a different god that they worship out there. They got this big red ribbon that flows from all of their windows and off of the flagpoles and such. And giving those details because that is something that is different. All the roofs in the port city are angled, which was weird. And they're like, you've never described the roofs before. I'm like, yeah, because you lived in the desert city this entire time. You didn't think about how they're all flat roofs. But you come to a new place and all the roofs are different. And it was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think I think it's that's a clever way to do things. I had a thought and I totally lost it.
I'm sorry. I do tend to go on a bit.
I was gonna reply to you and I was like, man, I have something really good to go along with this. Oh, I remember now. Oh, if you're going to add just as a general detail, if you are going to decide to now go and add these sort of excessive details, it's important that a lot of features in your world sort of have them. Okay, you don't want it to start really strong and then fall flat, and there's no more excessive detail later in your story. So, there are some general good guidelines, which is obviously use the senses, but come up with a formula that works. These are 3 things I'm going to point out about any given environment, or these are 3 things. I'm always going to describe 3 unique characteristics of any type of environment, even if they are things that the players might not find unique or the characters might not find unique. Follow a formula so that way things are fairly consistent, at least in the way that you deliver the excess information.
Yeah. Actually, I've got a really good thought about that.
Yeah.
Theme the crap out of your story. What I mean to say is, so you've got a story. You've written a good story, which is what we said to do before you start adding excessive details.
Yep.
Your story, like any good story, has a theme or two in it. It has a through line, sort of a moral or a point that you're trying to make, and maybe certain characters in the story have specific characteristics that you'd like to point out that tie into the story itself. Take 2 or 3 things from your story and associate objects or colors with those ideas, or maybe a smell or a sound or a texture, something, right? And incorporate those themes using those senses, using those descriptors in the scenes where those things happen. So you've got Barry the blacksmith, right? in your story, every time a character is hiding something, the scene is just a little too clean. The surfaces are a little too smooth. It's almost overly done to obfuscate what's going on. You go into Barry the Blacksmith, you describe the scene to him, and if your players are catching on that every time they come into a place that's a little too clean, that's a little too smooth, there's something behind that. Right? If you've got like broken weapons, could be, something that like a failure, like a problem in their past. Like they've come across this a couple of times. You see like a homeless man sitting on the side of the road with a broken sword. It doesn't work anymore. He's begging for change. That's just window dressing to your scene. Okay. And then you come across a bunch of soldiers coming back from a battle, their weapons, their spears broken, their shields shattered. You've reinforced that. You come into Barry's room, everything's too clean, so something's being hidden, and he's got the broken weapons and armor off in the corner. Right? You're taking those themes and you're layering them on top. And if you can use those themes, you can use that as a descriptive thing throughout your story. It doesn't tell your story. You're still telling the story. It's adding to the story. It's adding like that little glossy layer onto the story that really helps your players connect to these things. And it could be colors too, right? You can have warm colors for friendly people and cool colors for the bad guys, right? So you go in and Barry's place is way too clean. But it's all earth tones and the warm glow from the fire. But maybe his broken armor off in the corner has some enamel that's chipped off of it that's blue and gray with like a purple sash tied around it. Like those are not the colors of the good guys. So now you've really told this story with these descriptives without actually telling your players Barry's hiding something. Right? He's got a dark past where he did something terrible and he's doing everything he can to cover it up.
Oh, Barry.
What did you do? And that way you can really give some depth to something without having to be too descriptive. And if your players catch on, so good. So good.
That's great. You want your players to catch on to this. That's the whole point of adding all the descriptors. Don't do it with the whole point of like, don't be like, oh, great, they figured it out. No. You want them to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And if they don't figure it out, they will still figure it out. There's a lot of these things that seem like, oh, they'll never understand that, the color red means envy and jealousy. Yeah, they will. Even if they don't think it, they don't say it out loud. There are, you're not trying to make things weird. You're not saying, well, when it's purple, that means that there's a switch under the desk. No, don't do that. Try and keep things in the realm of, like purple is royalty, or cool colors are cool because they're cool colors. They're dark, or warm colors are warm and inviting. These are universal ideas. And you can use those as part of your theme, as part of your description, of part of your characters. It can help inform the scene, inform your characters about the people in the scene and how they live and what they're about. It can be a through line through your story. It can be a quick and easy way to get your players invested in how their characters are interacting with that scene. You got a lot going on for you.
Yeah.
does it have to end with just talking about the characters and the scenes?
No. And as you point out here, and as I sort of described earlier, before you talked about using the themes, which is a great way to stay on task with it, is don't just stop there. You want to add it to every bit of the story. Once you've added it, it's, you've already put in all the effort to add it to these various parts of the story. Put it everywhere. Put it everywhere in your story at that point. Turn this, again, truly level up your game here. Take it from one level to the next. And even if it's not the most memorable game to all your players, it will still be a great game in the long run, because if you have the basic foundations of it, and then you add all these descriptors to everything along the way with your game, that will add to the enjoyment and the perceived enjoyment from the game. It also gives you an opportunity to kind of express who you are as a storyteller, and things that you want to highlight within a game, or maybe doing some, you saw some cool thing somewhere and you're able to now express that in the game through all these extra details.
Yeah. You can describe everything, give things flavor, use it everywhere. You can do it in the combat. You can talk about how people are moving. I always like this. We've got all these different scenes with conversations. Your players are talking to somebody, they're having conversation, they're interrogating somebody, or they're just they're trying to buy potions at a store. How often is it just it's a static scene? The guy behind the counter, the guy they're talking to, the guy across the table is just motionless. We don't talk about how they're moving, how they're, if they're getting up, if they're talking, how fast they're talking, if they're moving their hands, if they're walking around. Describe these things. Describe how they're doing stuff. They're pouring themselves some tea. They're sitting down. How are they meticulous about what they're doing? Describe those things as well. It's important that your scenes feel alive if your players are going to live in them. And that also works for puzzles. I think puzzles are a real big thing of this. We talked about, handouts. We talked about, giving them some feel to them. But if you've got a puzzle in your game, your players are doing, they should be tactile. There should be some feel to it. There should be some response. You have a sliding block puzzle, or mosaics or something like that. And the pieces, you can hear the stones scraping against each other as they push into place. And just for a moment before it settles, you can feel the air rush out and it clicks into place with a large, satisfying. If you give the events senses and descriptions, your players are going to find it much more, relatable, memorable, interesting. And it's going to be that sort of thing that they talk about afterwards.
I agree. Do you have anything else you want to add to this, Josh?
Yeah. Don't go crazy. In my Cyberpunk game, I built a website that was a news site about the stories of the things that were going on in the city. And for several weeks of the game, I updated stories based on what was happening in game. That's too much. There was dozens of stories from different characters, NPCs they never met, just this is Barry with the sports, and that's Susie with the politics, and that's Rob talking about entertainment news. And no, don't.
that's sort of like, again, sort of like making a second job out of your hobby there. You're actually developing a website. Like that's probably too excessive. That's not details. That's just doing like an extra thing on top of like it's one thing to hand out the articles and to present the news articles, which I think is merit and usefulness. That's what we talked about here. But to actually generate a website, like that's a step beyond. I don't think that adds enough to the game.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely not. It was too much. And I'm telling you, dear listener, my friend listener, you don't have to go crazy. You just have to give your players a little bit more. Give them something to work with. And give yourself, these pointers, these descriptors of the places your players are going to be invited to, how the NPCs are going to interact there. If you've got a well-built NPC, you should have the basis for how it's going to turn out. And themes. Oh, theme the crap out of your game. Love a good theme.
There we go.
Yeah, that's what I got.
All right. Well, if you have any thoughts on adding excessive detail, maybe you have an example of when you added excessive detail to one of your games, let us know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. The podcast is also on YouTube, so you can find us there. Smash the like button, subscribe. Also, subscribe at your favorite podcasting site, review it, recommend it to a friend, all those good things. And that'll wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.